Hi everyone, so nice to welcome you this evening. I'm Dana McGinn, I'm the rabbi here at Temple Emmanuel, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. Just a little bit of housekeeping, just so you know if you haven't figured it out yet, just to make sure. You'll see bathrooms are back there. On my right, if you go back, you'll see the men's bathroom is all the way against the wall. Women's bathroom is the one to the right of that. Thank you. Very well done. Shirley Lee is now pointing out that's our banner right here today. Thank you, Shirley. Well done. And I just want to invite us all to take a deep breath. It's been a crazy world out there, and here's an opportunity for us to come together as a community and to learn together and spend some time. I'm really excited to get to do that. It's my great honor to welcome and officially introduce Jessica Blitchock, who's the incoming director of the JCRC, member of this congregation, and someone who's been very involved with Moms Demand Action as well. He's an incredible member of our community. He does so much. It's my great honor to welcome my friend, my buddy, and an amazing member of our community, Jessica Blitchock.
Well, good evening, everyone. As Robert Lagat said, I'm Jessica Blitchock, and I am the incoming director of the JCRC. And the JCRC is proud to serve as advocates for the Jewish community, fighting anti-Semitism through communal connection. This means building bridges of understanding across multicultural, faith, and institutional relationships. These relationships are grounded in shared values of respect, solidarity, and pursuing justice. Robert McGott already told you housekeeping detail about where the bathrooms are, but I also wanted to let you know that please feel free to pop up and get more cheese and wine as we go through the evening. You're not stuck in your seats. So it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome this evening's speakers. Our first speaker is Joe Goldman. He's the Community Engagement Director for the Western Region at HIAS, the world's oldest and only Jewish international humanitarian agency, serving refugees and asylum seekers of all backgrounds. Before joining HIAS, Joe worked at Mazone, a Jewish response to hunger. He also worked at the San Francisco-based JCRC, where he also was lucky enough to work with the Silicon Valley JCRC, and began his career working on several political campaigns and progressive advocacy efforts. Joe holds both a BA in political communication and a master's in political management from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and lives in his native Los Angeles with his husband, Adam, and his cute rescue doggie. I know about that because he told me yesterday. Representing Jewish Family Services of Silicon Valley tonight are Debbie Michaels and Kat Hakar. Debbie is the manager of public relations and was a longtime volunteer before joining the staff a little over a year ago as the refugee housing coordinator. She managed the volunteer committee that helped find housing for a large influx of Afghan refugees who were resettling here as a result of the Afghan crisis. Prior to joining JFS SV, Debbie managed communications for a prestigious real estate agent in the local area. She's a lifelong Temple Emmanuel member, where she served on the executive board as vice president of membership. She's a graduate of the University of California at Irvine and lives in San Jose with her husband Grant, who she met at Temple, and has 2 grown sons. And Kat. Kat is the manager of refugee services, overseeing the case managers who work with incoming refugees. Prior to joining JFS SV, Kat worked as a case manager at Mid-Penn Housing, connecting low-income families to affordable housing and financial resources. During the Russian invasion of Afghanistan in the late 80s, Kat's parents fled in the middle of the night with their 4 children, including Kat, to Pakistan, where they lived in a refugee camp for several weeks before settling there for several years. Back in Afghanistan, Kat's dad was an accountant for the city and her mom was a chemical engineer. They had to leave everything behind. Through a lottery system, the family was selected to move to the United States in 1996, where they began to rebuild their lives. Kat knows firsthand what it's like to be a newcomer in a strange land and needs support from the community. She holds a bachelor's in international relations and master's in international studies. She now lives in San Jose with her husband and her 4-year-old son, Mikey. And now I'd like to introduce Joe Goldman.
Erev Tov, good evening. Wow, this is a big crowd, you guys. Good work, San Jose and Silicon Valley. Thank you, Jessica, for the very warm introduction, and to all your colleagues at and JCRC, and JFS Silicon Valley, which is a rock star HIAS Resettlement Partner. And thank you to Temple Emmanuel for hosting us tonight. I hope there are many more events like this in the days and years to come. I also just want to acknowledge we have the retirement of two rock stars of this community, Mindy Berkowitz and Diane Fisher. I just want to give them a round of applause. They are rock stars. And I am truly humbled to be here on behalf of HIAS, as you heard, the world's oldest refugee resettlement agency and the only global Jewish international humanitarian NGO. We were established as the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society in the 1880s out of existential necessity to help Jewish people reach shelter, safety, and self-sufficiency out of harm's way as Jews fled Eastern Europe. And HIAS is also a Jewish organization now, proudly serving refugees, asylum seekers, and other forcibly displaced people of all backgrounds across 5 continents. With over 100 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, that's more than after World War II, our work has never been more important. HIAS provides psychosocial support, access to food, medicine, and shelter, economic empowerment, legal representation, and prevention of gender-based and anti-LGBTQ violence in over 20 countries. We're supporting Darfuri refugees in communities devastated by floods in Chad, and helping asylum seekers build new lives in over half of Latin America and the Caribbean. Our teams in Europe are mobilizing the continent's Jewish community to fight anti-refugee xenophobia. We're fighting to get climate refugees the same protections as those who are fleeing persecution, and we're advocating for fair treatment of asylum seekers at our borders and ports of entry here in the United States. Now let's be real. Our work does not happen in a vacuum. Overt anti-Semitism from a former and potential future president, alongside many other elected officials, tech billionaires and celebrities, as well as fulfilled and unfulfilled violent attacks against Jews over the past 5 years, is nothing short of alarming. Throw in attacks on access to abortion and gender-affirming care, the climate crisis, or well-organized assaults on the institutions that keep our fragile liberal democracy functioning, it can be very difficult for many of us to fathom how we can possibly manage to welcome the stranger when we must clean up our own house. Remember, the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh was explicitly targeted by a white supremacist because it was holding a HIAS refugee Shabbat. He believed in the Great Replacement theory, that all Jews are somehow in a cabal working together to dilute America's white majority to take over the country's levers of power. That anti-Semitism sits squarely in the center of the Venn diagram of those who oppose welcoming refugees, who claim that LGBTQ people like me are groomers, and continue to allow access to the guns used everywhere from Pittsburgh to Colorado Springs to El Paso to Buffalo and beyond. Guess what? We at HIAS are proud to be the worst nightmare of anti-Semites, authoritarians, and other bigots among us. Because we're the Jews and allies who are fighting every single day to welcome the stranger, contributing to the pluralistic democracy that has long kept Jews safe. I remember that the latest my own family arrived in America was 1907, when my great-grandmother, Dinah Waller, reached the United States after fleeing pogroms in her native Lithuania, in which she arrived at a time in which she had no right to vote, no control over her body. She was considered white enough to immigrate here, but not white enough to avoid widespread anti-Semitic discrimination that makes today's unacceptable reality look like a walk in the park. And she moved to a country where the state terrorized the lives of millions of people through Jim Crow laws and implemented some of the most egregious final stages of genocidal actions against Native Americans. Like Jews for generations, Dinah was a stranger in a strange land. Despite living in another time and dimension that is alien to all of us today, Dinah and her peers, the generations that followed them, persevered. They, the descendants of refugees and immigrants alongside those of former slaves and indigenous communities, fought for change in ways to make the idea of America far more real than it was when Dinah arrived. They've gone through 2 world wars, domestic upheavals, and participated in both the fights for and experienced the backlashes against the gains achieved by Jews, people of color, women, and LGBTQ people. And it's worth noting, there are millions of Jews who are people of color, women, and LGBTQ. Today's refugees are our future leaders. We owe it not just to them, but to ourselves to sustain and expand the policies that welcome the stranger. Too often in the Jewish community, we come up against a false binary, that we must choose between the particular and the universal, that somehow fighting for Jewish values that may benefit non-Jews is contradictory to fighting for Jews ourselves. I've been in rooms, many rooms, where major Jewish community leaders flat out say, if it's not helping Jews, it's not Jewish. HIAS confronts this dynamic every single day. Roughly 20 years ago, a decade after the collapse of the Soviet Union, global Jewry reached a point in which the overwhelming majority of Jews lived in countries where they had freedom of movement. After all, HIAS helped resettle roughly 4 million Jews all over the world during its first century. Instead of shutting our doors, the UN and State Department approached us and encouraged us to lean into our work as a Jewish agency working on behalf of people of all backgrounds. Today we say we helped refugees because they were Jewish, and today we help refugees because we are Jewish. There are some who claim that Jews must only care for themselves because we're in a world full of people who hate us, taking important lessons of the necessity of communal safety and self-defense from the Holocaust and Zionism to a whole new extreme. On the other end of the spectrum, there are folks who argue that because of our great success as a community in this country and in Israel, it's unnecessary or even offensive to dare to stand up for our own Jewish-specific concerns. Neither perspective squares with the lived experiences and worldviews held by most American Jews. Polling across the board demonstrates it. Bay Area and national studies show that between 75 and 80% of American Jews view social justice and equity as very important to how they build and express their Jewish identity, over 20% higher than almost any other tenet of Jewish life. Refugee policy shows us that there is no need to choose, that the binary between the particular and universal is false. In fact, refugee policy not only keeps us safe, it has allowed us to thrive. The global refugee resettlement system was established under the 1951 UN Geneva Convention in direct response to what happened to Jews after the Shoah. After witnessing the consequences of denying Jews a safe and legal means to seek refuge elsewhere, the international community came together to make sure that it never happens again. Both America and Israel are signatories of this treaty. And despite the fact that both governments, like many others, often fail to enforce their own agreements, it's a historic matter of Jewish safety and prosperity nonetheless. Think about it. The UN, an institution with a very complicated history in the Jewish world, although yesterday was the anniversary of the vote for partition, November 29th, 1947, it also set forth the resettlement system. That is very remarkable in the course of Jewish history. California Jewish life alone would be unrecognizable if not for refugee policy. Think of the hundreds of thousands of Holocaust survivors, Jews in the former Soviet Union and Iran, Israelis, many of whom were former refugees themselves before coming to America, who all make California home. Think of the countless contributions to our communal vitality, to our state's economy, culture, and politics from Jewish and non-Jewish refugees alike that greatly benefit us. We are so much stronger as a community because of refugee policies that welcome not just the Jewish stranger, but all strangers seeking refuge. Though HIAS is global, Ukraine remains at the heart of our agency's existence. Refugees fleeing the 1881 state-sanctioned pogroms in what is now Kyiv sparked HIAS's creation in the first place. We've gone on to help people flee future pogroms, Nazis, and Soviets in Ukraine. We later opened an office in Ukraine after the fall of the Soviet Union to assist with immigration, as well as to represent people from the Middle East, Asia, and Africa seeking refuge in the country. HIAS went on to serve those forcibly displaced within Ukraine by Putin's first invasion of Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk in 2014. And today we are operating to serve those displaced by the current war on both sides of Ukraine's borders. Ukraine, called Ukraina in both Ukrainian and Russian, and my apologies if I butchered the pronunciation to those who speak either language, literally means borderland. Yes, geopolitically, it means the borderland of many different countries and empires that rolled over it, from Russians to Poles, to back to Russians and Soviets, the Nazis and Soviets again. It's also the borderland of fragile democracy and authoritarianism. Just as Israel literally translates to struggle with God, I see another meaning with Ukraine for the Jewish community today. We are confronting the borderlands of our own emotional and intellectual challenges as Jews, of recognizing the need to stand up for our own people and for others. We're at the borderlands of the universalist and particularist experiences that shape Jewish history, culture, and values. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, the Jewish grandson of a Holocaust survivor, lives both literally and figuratively in those borderlands. As a Jew, I take enormous pride in Zelensky fighting for his own diaspora country, proving that we Jews can be accepted and admired by billions around the globe and inspire fear in authoritarian dictators. If Zelensky can fight for Ukrainians of all backgrounds, of Jews and non-Jews, then so can we. And we can apply the same tenacity, not just for all Ukrainian refugees, but of refugees from anywhere. We're speaking at a time in which we're rebuilding a very fragile US resettlement system. Let's go over some history and figures, which I already know I've done some with you guys, and I promise not to quiz you later. Our resettlement system was gutted under the previous administration. In the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year, we only welcomed 11,000 refugees, down from a bipartisan average of 95,000. Now, that's a teeny tiny number of people already out of the 1 million immigrants we typically would naturalize every year. Yes, we now have an ostensibly pro-refugee administration which reset refugee admissions to 125,000 for the new fiscal year that began on October 1st, 2021, meaning that critical funding would be released to NGOs like HIAS and our partners at JFS Silicon Valley to hire case managers, social workers, translators, and others in the public-private partnership that defines refugee resettlement. Then we could go off into the sunset, rebuild the system, and live happily ever after, right? Except that's so not what happened. Kabul fell August 15th, 2021, 6 weeks before the new fiscal year began. And the administration did not have an evacuation plan. Remember, a resettlement agency typically should have a lead of about 10 days to 3 weeks before new clients arrive. But when 76,000 pretty much arrived all at once, the system was in shock. We sprang into action at HIAS. We mobilized supporters nationwide to push Congress and the Biden administration to financially support Afghan resettlement like any other refugee group, and we directed our substantial network of activists and supporters at congregations and elsewhere to donate to and volunteer with our resettlement partners. And for cities that don't have resettlement partners, like my own Los Angeles, we launched HIAS Welcome Circles to help lessen the strain on the system in a program modeled on the highly successful ways of private sponsorship that work in Canada. Groups of 5 to 8 core volunteers would form mini agencies anchored typically at local Jewish organizations to assist with finding housing, enrolling in health insurance, schools, vocational training, and much more. But they are ineligible for any federal funding, and they have to raise all their own money that is kept in-house out with HIAS to help resettle refugees over a 6-month period. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, HIAS advocated for the Biden administration to resettle Ukrainian refugees. It took 2 months before the administration finally launched the United for Ukraine program. Practically speaking, the process is intended to provide speedy entry, but people will only be granted temporary humanitarian parole for up to 2 years, rather than a permanent status. Ukrainians may want to go home quickly, But unfortunately, that may not be possible for a long time. HIAS knows this fact firsthand. Our Ukrainian staff on the ground just endured shelling and loss of power from a Russian military attack in Kyiv in the middle of our board meeting. Even the many who have returned to Ukraine are staying in the country's western regions, away from the southern and eastern focal points of the war, where entire cities and towns have been destroyed. Social and economic challenges, especially an acute housing shortage, dampen the abilities for Ukrainians to stay. Lack of access to heat in these bitter, cold months ahead jeopardizes the ability for Ukrainians to remain. Individuals in America who sponsor Ukrainians must prove that they have enough wealth to ensure that Ukrainians won't become public charges, a policy once used to deny entry to Jewish refugees fleeing pogroms and Nazis. It's even more confusing because Ukrainians are actually eligible for programs like Medicaid, SNAP, and TANF, but thousands never signed up for these programs out of fear that it would compromise their stay in the United States, further straining private sector philanthropic support for these populations. Just as we've seen with over half of all Afghans, resorting to humanitarian parole means putting Ukrainians into our overwhelmed immigration courts to seek asylum, which is a wholly inefficient way to ensure that new arrivals have access to the support and any sense of self-determination that they deserve. Another sharp contrast with Afghanistan is that the US government isn't matching Ukrainians with sponsors. The US government brought Afghans here and processes other refugees abroad before they arrive. The Uniting for Ukraine program is completely decentralized and privileges Ukrainians with American ties, otherwise leaving thousands to seek sponsors through social media, creating a situation rife with opportunities for human trafficking. That's why HIAS has developed a sophisticated matching system deployed by our staff in Ukraine and its neighbors to bridge this gap to ensure that Ukrainians in need are connected to HIAS Welcome Circles, not just here in the US, but all across Europe. Not only does Israel play an important role vis-a-vis Ukrainian refugees, it's also a place that gets to the heart and challenge of the balancing the particular and universal of Jewish experience, safety, and prosperity, especially with a HIAS lens. Before I go any further, I have the following disclaimer because Israel's always touchy. Israel's my home away from home, a nation I visited 8 times in the past 13 years. I had family in Givatayim by Tel Aviv for 25 years and more cousins making Aliyah very soon. A lifelong advocate for 2 states for 2 peoples, I professionally fought BDS here in the Bay Area for half a decade and staffed civic delegations to the country. HIAS proudly helped establish Israel by resettling millions of Jewish refugees during every wave of Aliyah, even those preceding the country's independence. It's home to HIAS's longest running foreign country office. We've held permanent operations there since 1950. For those who may not be as familiar, Israel is home to upwards of 1 million Jews from the former Soviet Union, and hundreds of thousands of them have non-Jewish spouses on a proportional basis, very similar to American Jews. All those people moved to Israel under the law of return. Naturally, there were thousands, tens of thousands, of non-Jewish Ukrainians who fled to the only other place on earth where they have family. And thanks to my colleagues who mobilized new legions of pro bono attorneys from Israel's flourishing tech industry, HIAS has led successful impact litigation to ensure that more non-Jews who seek safety in Israel with family and friends can do so. We're seeing new challenges unfold as Netanyahu signed a coalition agreement with member of the Knesset Avi Maoz, who seeks to change the law of return by gutting the right of grandchildren of Jews to immigrate to Israel, as well as deny Aliyah based on non-Orthodox conversion, both of which disproportionately harm Jews and their families fleeing Ukraine and Putin's Russia, let alone those of us here in the US. The new coalition also seeks to remove judicial independence, gutting not just an essential pillar of liberal democracy, but a place where we at HIAS often seek recourse for our clients. HIAS Israel's efforts on behalf of Jewish Olim from the former Soviet Union, vulnerable populations who are non-Jews from Ukraine, as well as asylum seekers from Eritrea and Sudan, and openly LGBTQ people from Palestine continue to navigate those borderlands between the particular and the universal, and aspiring for an Israel that lives up to the Zionist dream of a safe and welcoming Jewish democracy. If HIAS and our partners can find the right balance of our aspirations in Israel, a country facing existential threats from within and profound geopolitical challenges in its very tough neighborhood that can make some of our own very scary problems seem like a cakewalk, then you bet we can do it right here in the United States and around the world. So here's your action plan. Please get involved with advocacy with HIAS. We need you at the state, national, and local levels. Nationally, we need you to demand that Congress pass the Afghan Adjustment Act so that over half the Afghans who are airlifted here are put on a path to permanency instead of forced to each individually go through our overburdened asylum system. We also need to make sure that we hold the Biden administration accountable for resettling 125,000 refugees as part of our global responsibility to help refugees displaced worldwide. Because Afghans and Ukrainians aside, the past fiscal year we only resettled, I think, about 20,000 nationwide. So we have our work cut out for us. At the state level, I hope you will work with us to extend case management for underserved refugees and ensuring that those who come to California can get more support in getting access to housing, covering basic needs, and achieving self-sufficiency. This would result in more funding for JFS Silicon Valley. And a number of us were just at a JPAC board meeting yesterday, the Jewish Public Affairs Committee of California, which has an advocacy day in Sacramento this May. You should all join us. And locally, I have 3 asks. First, do whatever JFS asks you to do. Listen to them first. Second, stand up to NIMBYism.
Yes.
Those signs in front of single-family homes that say, in this house we believe that refugees are welcome, climate change is real, and Black Lives Matter, are meaningless if the homeowners either passively ignore or actively oppose increasing housing in their own cities. Housing is the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 needs for refugees locally, and it's most impacted by the lack of supply across all income levels. Show up at your neighborhood council, planning commission, and city council meetings to demand more housing. And believe me, as a former San Franciscan, I know that this is very touchy, probably for many of you here more touchy than Israel. But I know that with science, economics, and basic human decency, we don't have to choose between maintaining our home values and welcoming the stranger. And third, organize Refugee Shabbat in February at this synagogue and around the Bay Area to say, Anachnu po, we are here as Jews and allies who refuse to back down from our core values of welcoming the stranger. So as we navigate the borderlands of these uncertain times, I hope that we find strength in our Jewish identity, and if you're not Jewish, thank you for being with us tonight, and our history and our culture. We don't have to choose between the particular and the universal, because welcoming the stranger is exactly who we are. Toda raba, thank you so much.
I love what Joe said, that you need to do what we ask you to do. That was the best. Give me a minute just to start our slideshow. Let's hope it works. There we go. I don't even know how to follow that. Gotta take a breath. Good evening, everyone. I'm Debbie Michaels, and I'm the Manager of Public Relations for Jewish Family Services of Silicon Valley. And I want to welcome all of you. There's so many of you I know here, so I'm like nervous, because it's one thing when you're talking to people you don't know, but when it's your friends and family, I'm shaking. I want to first thank Joe so much for coming. When I met him a few months ago, I said, you need to come to Temple Emmanuel in the South Bay, where your HIAS affiliate is. And he called and he said, I'm coming. So thank you so much for coming and talking. I want to thank Temple Emmanuel for opening up the temple tonight to host this, and for co-hosting our wine and cheese reception. And please do help yourself. Don't feel like you have to sit if you want that glass of wine. I want to thank our management team. I want to thank Mindy Berkowitz. Mindy, stand up. Mindy is retiring in just a few short weeks after almost 20 years of Jewish Family Services. And I want to thank Susan Fraser, our incoming CEO. Susan, stand. And I'm going to do something that's going to embarrass a lot of people here, but I would love our Jewish Family Services staff to all stand up. You know who you are. I want everyone to see you. These are our refugee resettlement staff who are working on the ground, and we'll talk to you about what that looks like. But these are the men and women who are working every day to help the people that Joe's talking about come and rebuild lives here in the U.S. And so I wanted you to see their faces and give them a shout out because they work really hard. Joe's done an incredible job sharing with you about the refugee crisis and what's going on at the global and national level, and ways you can get involved, and all the ways that HIAS is working to help protect and support all the displaced people worldwide. Jewish Family Services of Silicon Valley, as Joe mentioned, is a HIAS affiliate, which means that we are a local resettlement agency resettling refugees that HIAS assigns to us here in Santa Clara County. My colleague Kat will share with you what resettlement looks like at the local level and the role we play in helping refugees begin new lives here. But first, I'd like to give you a really quick overview of the agency. Since 1978, Jewish Family Services of Silicon Valley, also known as JFS SV, and when I'm lazy, JFS, has been empowering individuals and families facing life's challenges by providing quality human services inspired by Jewish values. And the Jewish values that inform our work, I think, are values that we all can relate to. Repairing our world, welcoming the stranger, and showing respect and dignity for all members of both the Jewish and non-Jewish community. The programs and services we provide fall into three main categories. This is at a very simplistic level. Social work and case management for our Aging with Dignity program, including Holocaust survivors and homebound older adults. Our adult and family services program supporting individuals and families in the community who are facing a crisis or an ongoing challenge, and our refugee resettlement and career services program, which is why you're here tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kat.
JFS SV is one of 3 resettlement agencies in Northern California and one of the 2 in Santa Clara County. Other local agencies International Rescue Committee, also known as IRC. Since last July of 2021, with the beginning of the Afghan crisis, we have resettled more than 400 refugees, mostly from Afghanistan. A few from Iran, Burma, El Salvador, Congo, and Russia. This year we expect to, or this upcoming year, we're expecting to resettle hundreds more refugees mostly from Afghanistan and Ukraine. Our incredible volunteer housing committee led by our housing coordinator, Allison Landers, has found permanent housing for more than 350 refugees. In the past 30 days, we found housing for 22 people, including family of 7, 9, and 8. Some refugees live with family members, move out of the area, or find their own housing. Therefore, we do not find housing for all of them. That's why we've only mentioned the ones that we have found housing for. Since October of 2021, we've helped 76 refugees find employment, and since this past October, we've already helped 15 refugees find jobs thanks to our career counselor, Jenny Ramos, and also our vocational case manager, Caroline Gopashin. We're currently working with 25 Ukrainians and 10 Afghan women who are seeking employment, and this is huge. Since October of 2021, we've had 69 students in our ESL or VESSEL program run by our wonderful education coordinator, Natalie Laser, and her team. She currently has 34 students and attending classes which are Monday through Thursday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and also Mondays are usually off-site or distance learning. And I want to share that many of these students take public transportation, sometimes 2 to 3 buses to get to classes. Their English language skills range from pre-beginner to advanced speakers. And I want to emphasize or mention that some of these individuals are illiterate in their own language, meaning they've never attended school, they don't know how to read and write their own language. So they are learning how to read and write and speak a foreign language for the first time. So what does a resettlement agency do to help refugees establish new lives here in the U.S.? Our ultimate goal as a resettlement agency is to take a family from being dependent on the system when they first arrive to being self-sufficient contributors to society. I'd like to share a story of one of our clients and how our staff is helping resettle them. A highly educated doctor in Afghanistan worked at a U.S. military base in Kabul. When the Taliban took power, he was part of the U.S. emergency evacuation and was bringing his family here to Santa Clara County where he has a family member. And it's his wife and 5 kids, and one of their younger children has a severe disability with a life expectancy of only 12. Right before leaving Afghanistan, the husband passes away from COVID, leaving the wife with 5 kids and a disabled child. And his dying wish to his wife was to make sure that his wife and the 5 children were able to leave Afghanistan safely and come to the U.S. The mother has a 4th grade education, does not speak, read, or write English, and her only relative here is her stepbrother that has 5 children or kids of his own and here in Santa Clara County. So how does JFSV help? Once we were assigned this family, Azita, our resettlement manager, contacted the USI for pre-arrival to coordinate transportation from the airport and from the airport, then providing temporary housing and also providing hot meal for the first night. I personally visited the family within the first 24 hours to just assess their needs. Do they need clothing? Do they need any kind of essentials to see what they needed and how we can support the family? I did provide the family with their welcome money and also purchased for them to purchase any essential needs that they would need until their benefits were to start. And I also provided the mom with a cell phone with 3-month plan. I made sure that the groceries were purchased, delivered to the family with diapers until their benefits were activated. Once I returned back to the office, I was able to apply for their benefits, including for cash aid, food stamp, medical, and as well as WIC, which is for families, moms that have younger children that can help provide additional support. After applying for their benefits, our healthcare navigator scheduled their appointments with our refugee clinic, which every refugee family has to go through, and making an appointment for every individual family member and arranging transportation to and from their appointment. Allison and her housing committee were then tasked with finding permanent housing for this family. If it's a family with children, we work with Abode, which is an organization that helps subsidize rent for the first year only. But if it's an individual or a couple that don't have kids, it is up to our community's responsibility for finding affordable housing and safe apartment for them. We help them complete their rental application, coordinate security deposit, and first month's rent. We act as the liaison between the property manager, landlord, and the family. Clients are also referred to our county vocational program, which I had just been over with how we replace them with jobs with Caroline and Jeremy. And some of the employment companies that we do work with are, for example, Sanmina, Tesla, Safeway, or Macy's, just to name a few for you. If a refugee comes to us with a known medical issue, we will refer them to our preferred communities case manager, who provides services and resources to those that need additional or extensive case management. All of this is to take place within the first 90 days of their arrival. Many families also come with babies or younger children where we have to provide them with car seats in advance to make sure that they have that available to them. So car seats, boosters, or strollers. In the case of the mom with 5 children, a wonderful family in the community opened up their in-law unit in their backyard to the family, allowing them to stay for several months until our housing committee worked together with a boat and that were able to find the family their own permanent housing. Because this mom does not speak English, I acted as the translator and the liaison between the host family and our client, and was there to help them move and settle into their house, temporary housing. Once the family was, Alice and her amazing team worked with a boat and was able to find housing, permanent housing for this individual, for this family. We also, the housing community, coordinated to help with their move and also provide furniture, new mattresses, new linens and couches, or any other household goods that they needed. I then assisted the family with enrolling the kids in school. And for the first time, the young son who is ill is receiving medical treatment that he never had access to back in Afghanistan. The mother's goal is to make sure her children are educated here in the US, and I am now working to connect her with in-home supportive services, which is also known as HIAS, where she gets payment as a full-time caregiver for her son. Eventually, the mom's goal is to one day get an education, which was her husband's wish for her, and for her to become a nurse in her husband's memory. JFS SV will provide resources and support for this family and our other refugees whenever and as they need.
That's just one family in the hundreds that we resettle every year, and they're still coming in. That's one story, and we have hundreds more like those. As Kat shared, there is a lot that goes into resettling a newly arrived refugee or refugee family. And with the huge influx of refugees from Afghanistan, Ukraine, and other countries, we have a lot of unmet needs at JFS. And this is where Joe said you have to do what I say. There are 2 basic areas, though, where we can use help. As Joe said, housing, 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 and financial support. So they don't have income. They don't have credit history here. They don't have 3 to 4 times the monthly income that a landlord requires to rent to them. So we're asking landlords and property managers to, in essence, take a risk on our client. It's a challenge. This is where you can help. We're looking for people who have a rental property, an apartment or a house or an ADU, an in-law unit, who are willing to rent to a refugee family or individuals. We're also looking for people who are willing to temporarily home host a family. Like we said, this one family opened up their ADU to the mom with the 5 children. It buys us time to help them get established to find their permanent house. As we continue to support Afghan refugees who are still arriving, as well as all the Ukrainian newcomers who are coming in, We need a great deal of financial support to sustain this very large resettlement operation and provide support for housing, food, transportation, and so many other essential needs. Here's just a few examples of the way your financial support helps JFS. And again, just a few examples. I could go on for hours. I won't. Your support allows us to provide housing, security deposit, and rental subsidies. As I shared, landlords are hesitant to rent to people who don't have jobs, income, and credit history. So if we can provide a slightly larger security deposit or help pay an extra month's rent up front, landlords are sometimes more willing to rent to us. When we can do that and secure that housing, those families can begin to stabilize much more quickly. Your support allows us to pay tuition for a refugee who wants to attend trade school. I just learned this. There's a truck driving program that many of our refugees want to learn how to be truck drivers, barbers, beauticians, but they can't afford the school. So if we can help them pay their tuition, we help them on their path to learning a trade, finding employment, and becoming self-sufficient. It would also allow us to purchase enough workbooks for our ESL students who have to share right now. This way, if we had more workbooks, they could each take their own workbook home and keep it. And it would allow us to get more technology. We have interactive screens, laptops, and other technology that Natalie and her ESL team need to help everybody learn English. It would allow us to subsidize and or pay for driving school. Imagine you're a family of 8 and you have to take buses everywhere, to your jobs, to your medical appointments, to get your kids to school, to run to the grocery store. We also, as well as housing, you know what the public transportation is like here. It's not efficient, it's not easy. So when we can help somebody learn how to drive and they can get a car, it helps them get where they need to go in a more timely and efficient manner. As Kat said, when we move somebody into permanent housing, we are responsible for providing them with everything to furnish that home. We have to provide them with new beds, bedding, linen, and all their household goods. Your support helps us do that. And your support helps us create and maintain the infrastructure that allows us to provide all these services and support to these refugees. There are a couple of other ways to help. Again, and Robin, I have to shout out to Robin Feynman-Marino, our volunteer coordinator. We're always looking for volunteers. Many of you here tonight are. Thank you. As Joe mentioned, there are welcome circles, and at JFS, we're looking for people who are interested in forming a welcome circle with others in your community to support refugees. A welcome circle is a way for a small group to wrap their arms around a newly arrived refugee or family to help mentor and support them. Imagine coming here and you don't know how to grocery shop in Safeway. That's very different for many people. They need to learn how to navigate a grocery store, how to go to the library, how to take public transportation, help provide transportation for them to and from their appointments. So make sure they're connected to the vital resources and have the extra support that they need to rebuild their lives here. And lastly, are you a part of an organization that would like to partner with JFS SV? Many organizations already support our programming throughout the year, such as our Equip to Learn Back to School Drive and our Embrace a Family holiday program going on right now. You've all got flyers. There are so many ways for us to partner together to support refugees and newcomers to our community. So please reach out if you'd like to help us do that. We've all thrown a lot of information at you tonight, and I want to thank you again all so much for coming, to everybody who helped make this event possible. And we want to open it up for questions. I'm sure there are questions, so thank you. Raise your hand if you have it. Nobody has a question? Yes, Diane.
All right, Diane.
I was just picturing being a kid and going to school in these circumstances, and I was wondering what kind of resources are available specifically to support children.
So based on my experience as far as enrolling these kids to school, it depends district to district. Some districts do have ESL classes or newcomer classes, and some schools don't, and they're thrown in the same classroom as other